Most people look at their backyard and see grass. Maybe a tree. The fence. A dog running in circles. But I'm going to show you something today that's going to change the way you see that patch of land forever. Because what you've got out there, even if it's small, even if it's shaded, even if it's full of weeds right now, is enough to feed your family. Not a salad. Not a handful of tomatoes in August. I mean real food. Calories. Protein. Carbs. The kind of food that kept families alive during the Depression when there was no grocery store to run to, no Amazon Prime, no credit card. Just dirt and seeds and the knowledge of how to use them right. Here's what most people don't know. A quarter acre of land, that's roughly a 100 by 100 foot space, was once considered enough to feed a family of 4 for an entire year. That's a fact. Wartime victory gardens during World War II covered less than that and produced over 40% of all vegetables consumed in the United States. 40%. From backyards and empty lots and rooftops. And those people weren't gardening experts. They were factory workers, housewives, old men who grew up farming and passed down what they knew. They were on YouTube. No raised bed kits from the hardware store. Just knowledge. And now I'm going to give you that same knowledge, piece by piece, starting right now. First thing you have to understand is that your backyard isn't just a backyard. It's a system. And every system has zones. Think of it like a house. You don't put the kitchen in the basement or the bedroom in the garage. Everything goes where it makes the most sense. Your land works the same way. The spot that gets full sun all day is not the same as the shaded corner by the fence. The area near the hose bib is not the same as the dry strip against the foundation. When you start treating your yard like a system with distinct zones, each one with its own purpose, its own plants, its own job to do, that's when everything changes. Let me walk you through it the way old homesteaders used to do it. Start at your back door. Everything within 10, maybe 15 feet of that door should be your daily garden. This is where you grow what you use every single day. Herbs. Greens. Maybe a small bed of radishes or green onions. Things you grab while you're cooking dinner, things you don't want to walk to the back corner of the yard to find. Chips. Parsley. Mint. A few kale plants. That zone should require almost no effort because you're walking past it 5 times a day anyway. You'll water it without thinking. You'll notice when something's wrong before it becomes a problem. That's the Zone 1 principle, and it's been used in traditional farm design for centuries across Appalachia, across the Native American nations of the Southwest, across every culture that ever had to grow their own food to survive. Now move further out. The middle zone, from 15 feet out to maybe 50 or 60 feet, this is your calorie zone. This is where the serious food grows. Potatoes. Sweet potatoes. Winter squash. Dry beans. Corn. These are the crops that store. These are the crops that fed this country before refrigerators existed. A single 40-foot row of dry beans, pole beans left to ripen and dry on the vine, can yield 10 to 15 pounds of dried beans. That's months of protein. A 4x8 bed of sweet potatoes in full sun can give you 50 to 100 pounds of food from a handful of slips that costs almost nothing. And winter squash, 1 hill, 3 seeds, full sun and decent soil, can produce 20, 30, 40 pounds of food that will sit in your garage until February without any preservation at all. No canning. No freezing. Just a cool dry shelf. Now here's the part most people skip, and it's the reason they always feel like they're not getting enough out of their garden. The far zone. The edges. The fence lines. The spots you've been ignoring. That's where your perennials go. Your fruit trees. Your berry bushes. Your asparagus beds and rhubarb crowns and Jerusalem artichokes. These are the plants that you put in once and they come back every single year without you doing much of anything. An elderberry bush planted against your back fence today will give you berries in 2 years and will still be producing when your grandchildren are old enough to harvest it themselves. Comfrey planted along a fence line acts like a living fertilizer factory, pulling nutrients from deep in the soil and dropping them on the surface every time you cut it back. Hazelnuts. Persimmons. Pawpaws. These are the forgotten fruits of American homesteads, the ones that grew at the edge of every farm from Virginia to Iowa, and people have been overlooking them for 50 years because the grocery store made them irrelevant. They're not irrelevant anymore. And before you say you don't have room, listen to me. A quarter acre in a typical suburban neighborhood is more space than you think. Most suburban lots run between 6,000 and 10,000 square feet. A quarter acre is just over 10,000 square feet. But here's the thing, you don't need a quarter acre. You need to use what you have efficiently. A family in Boston I read about once grew over 1,000 pounds of food in 4,000 square feet. That's less than half a quarter acre. They mapped their space exactly the way I just described. They identified every microclimate, every patch of sun, every spot that stayed wet after rain, and they planted according to what that spot could actually support. Not what they wished it could support. What it actually could. That is the secret most people miss. They plant what they want to eat. The old farmers planted what the land could grow. And then they until what grew. Sweet potatoes for the dry sandy spots. Taro and watercress where it stayed boggy near the downspout. Shade-tolerant greens, wild garlic, sorrel, wood sorrel, miner's lettuce, under the trees where nothing else would go. They used everything. They wasted nothing. And they do well. Now, here is something I need you to stop and think about. What would happen right now, tonight, if the grocery store was closed for 2 weeks? Not a hurricane warning 2 weeks. Not a snow day 2 weeks. Just closed. Unavailable. Gone. How long would you last on what's in your yard right now? Most people would last 3 days. Maybe less. That number should bother you. It bothered people during the Depression. It bothered people during the war. And it bothered every generation of Americans before the supermarket made us forget that food doesn't just appear on a shelf. Somebody has to grow it. The difference between the families who made it through hard times and the ones who didn't have money. It wasn't luck. It was land use. It was knowing how to look at a patch of ground and see food instead of grass. And that skill is sitting right outside your back door, waiting for you to pick it back up. So here is what I want you to do. This week. Not next month, not next spring. This week. Go outside and walk your yard. Look at where the sun hits first in the morning and where it lingers longest in the afternoon. Notice where it stays wet after it rains. Notice where the soil looks dark and rich versus dry and pale. Write it down. Draw it out on a piece of paper, even if it looks like a kindergarten map. That map is your plan. That map is the difference between a garden that frustrates you every summer and a yard that quietly, steadily produces real food year after year after year. You don't need to do it all at once. Start with Zone 1. Plant 3 herbs by your back door this weekend. Move to Zone 2 next month. Put in 1 bed of sweet potatoes and 1 bed of dry beans. Then in fall, plant a fruit tree in that back corner you've been ignoring. Each small step builds the system. And once the system is working, it almost runs itself. The old farmers had a saying in the hill country of Kentucky and Tennessee. They said, "Take care of the land and the land takes care of you." They didn't mean it poetically. They meant it literally. They had seen what happened when a family managed their land well and what happened when they didn't. They had buried neighbors who didn't. That knowledge was serious. It was survival. And now I'm asking you to take it seriously too, in whatever small way you can start today. If this gave you something to think about, something to try, something you're going to take outside and actually do, drop it in the comments. Tell me your yard size, tell me your zone, tell me what you're already growing or what you wish you were growing. I read every single comment and I want to know what's happening in your backyard. If you know someone who needs to see this, a neighbor, a friend, a family member with a yard they're not using, share it with them. This information is too important to keep to yourself. Hit that like button so more people can find this, and subscribe if you're not already, because every week I'm going to give you one more piece of this puzzle. One more technique. One more old trick that got lost somewhere between the invention of the supermarket and right now. See you in the next one.